my dears, today's video is going to be another marathon one about how grading is a disaster and how we really need to figure that out, but it's making me wildly angry at the entire school system, and when I need a break from my frustrations with that, I turn to YouTube. Only to find myself face to face with a bunch of Broadway drama directly related to my future as an actor and my current work in the realm of accessibility and theater, and I cannot stop thinking about it, so I can't focus on working on the marathon video. And y'all voted you wanted to see this in my Instagram story, so here we are. If you're new here, hi there, hello. My name is Sydney, my pronouns are they, them. I am an openly disabled, autistic, queer, non-binary actor, currently directing the world's first all-neurodivergent cast and crew production of The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime, and I'm also composing for a new disability-based musical, and I am a staunch advocate for accessibility in the arts, especially for change on Broadway, because that's like the top tier of theater, and there's never been an openly autistic actor in a Broadway show or on a national tour. I'm trying to figure out how to change that. We'll see. And I try to avoid talking directly about Broadway in this channel because I'm scared that if I potentially call them out for things, as much as they very much need to be called out, I will not get hired to do what I want to do to change the industry from the inside, and that really terrifies me, so I was going to talk about it later. But I think in this case, I have some things to add to this conversation as a multiple minority person in the business, and I'm kind of realizing also that like maybe I don't want to be the perfect little angel to get a job, and instead just kind of go for it anyway as my beautiful spunky self and change the world while I'm at it, you know? I think that maybe researching, grading, and learning about the trash fire that is our school system is causing me to want to unleash chaos everywhere that I go, and I might be turning into a bit of an anarchist. I'm a little bit concerned, but I'm also enjoying myself, so there's that. But anyway, today we're going to talk about that interview with Sarah Porkalab that she did with Vulture, and the Hadestown situation, what happened in both of those cases, what we can learn from them, and how the only reason that these things are big scandals is because people are making very valid points about how our industry is broken and where maybe we might want to go from here. I promise that this channel is not going to become a Broadway drama channel. I don't want that to happen, but I do think that this is an important thing to bring up and an important thing to talk about, so that's what we're gonna do. So let us start by breaking down the situations. First, let's talk about the Hadestown situation. So earlier this week, an actor and activist by the name Samantha Coleman shared her story on social media about how she went to see Hadestown on Broadway. She's deafblind according to her bio. She was using a mobile closed caption device and was yelled at twice by one of the performers during the show for recording it, despite that very much not being the case. Her post was super kind. She said that she wanted to share this not to bash anybody or try to play the victim or get clout. She literally just wanted to share her story with the world because it's an important opportunity for conversation, education, change, learning, etc. about how theater is systemically exclusionary to disabled people and how without addressing that form of inequality in the theater, we cannot progress as an industry. It was super well written and honest, and I really, really, really respect how she went about it. It's also important to mention that she did not state which cast member did yell at her during the show. I'm not sure how people found out that it was Lillias White, but I'm gonna assume that somebody either saw this video and was like, oh, I was there that night, or just like, I don't know, the internet is really good at finding things out. We learned this with the Ned Fulmer situation. But anyway, so the response to this whole situation was that people decided to start sending the fan page of Lillias White, who was the actor who called Samantha out, death threats and horrible racist things, and just throwing all those things around, which is not okay. Like, no, I don't think an actor should yell at an audience member and take everybody else in the theater out of the performance experience, because that's not fair. And we're going to talk about that in a bit, but also we shouldn't be sending death threats to somebody who does, or using this as a chance to get away with saying really racist and ageist stuff. That's not okay. Lillias is a wonderful human from everything that I've heard about her, and she does not deserve any of this. She made an honest mistake. Do I love and appreciate how the community has stood up for the fact that accessibility is always an afterthought on Broadway and how that really, really needs to change? Absolutely. I cannot express how much it means to me, but I also don't think that we should be calling out the actor for ableism because she genuinely didn't know. And before you go, well, she should have known, let's all be honest with ourselves here. People don't immediately think, oh, it's an accommodation when something is happening. As a human who has disability on their mind 24/7, I still struggle doing that, especially if somebody's doing something that really bothers me, that's very annoying, in which case I'm much more likely to not be like, oh, they're probably disabled, it's an accessibility thing. I'm just gonna be mad about it because I want to be mad about it, so I'm gonna be mad about it. So I do not blame her for not immediately going, oh, this must be an accessibility device, because the statistical likelihood of it being a recording device is much higher than it being an accessibility thing. Sure, I don't think that actors should be yelling at audience members during a show, or yelling at audience members ever, really. But I'm also not going to call her ableist or attack her. That's completely uncalled for and not okay on any level. So now is a great time to bring in the conversation of our double standards, right? Because everything's intersectional. I'm not going to talk about it into too much detail because it doesn't majorly pertain to this, and Mickey Jo Theater did a great video about it and you can watch it. I'll link it in the description for you. But basically, a few years ago, Patti LuPone, if you don't know who that is, she is a Broadway diva, like one of the greats, you know? And she yelled at somebody in the audience a few years ago because that person was taking pictures on their phone, and everybody applauded her and was celebrating her for it. She's also done that before. She took somebody's phone at one point. She yelled at somebody during a show, or during a talkback after a show, about wearing their mask earlier this year. Everybody applauded that. They made t-shirts about it. It was a whole big deal. And in response to this Hadestown situation, a lot of people have gone, hi, why are we sending death threats to Lilias White when we've celebrated Patti for doing the exact same thing over and over again? Oh wait, it's because Lilias is a black woman and therefore we're gonna attack her because this gives us the chance to be mad and be racist because we can do that because she's not white. Which is such an important point to be bringing up. Thank you to everybody who brought that up. The double standards are very real and they're very gross and we need to be very aware of those. Yes, but also, like, this story originally started with a, hey guys, accessibility is important and I need you to know about my experience, which is a very important conversation. And then it turned into a, hey guys, maybe stop attacking this lovely, wildly talented, elderly black woman who we love and adore who made an honest mistake, which is also a super important conversation. And oh, sorry, what? Oh, so this story turned into Patti LuPone resigned from the Stage Actors Union because of all the Broadway drama, which arguably does not matter at all in comparison to the other conversations that we're having. And also now when you Google Hadestown captioning device, the first two articles are about Patti LuPone, who's literally not related to any of the important parts of this situation at all, and also probably gave up her equity card a while back anyway because she said the company was going to be her last show. But now she's coming into the spotlight trying to make this story, you know, a story about disability and race, directly about her as a cis, able-bodied white woman. Great, and now the news is ignoring important conversations that were being had before this and is instead only talking about Patti LuPone when she's not the one that's receiving death threats or having her access taken away. And she does not matter in this situation. So that's just delightful. But to give her a little more airtime, Patti announced in a tweet where she said, quite a week on Broadway, seeing my name being bandied about, gave up my equity card, no longer part of that circus, figure it out. And you can call this a circus. I'm gonna call it, I don't know, an out-of-touch industry being forced to come to terms with the inequity that it has and having conversations about how, I don't know, maybe we need to do something about it, and also at the same time proving its own point by using racism to harass somebody else involved in a situation. So I'm gonna disagree with the circus sentiment. Not to mention that I feel like we should not be surprised or upset that Broadway has a lot of drama because it's theater and it's where all the divas in the world go, so of course there's gonna be drama, but this isn't about Patti, so we're moving on. Just wanted to nicely call out that situation a little bit. Let's get back to the accessibility conversation. I'm gonna make a video down the line about accessibility on Broadway and what options are available. I was waiting to make this video until I moved to New York because I have a couple friends who work in accessible theater stuff, in the actual action of making things accessible, and I wanted to like interview them or like do the video with them so you can actually see the devices and whatever. So that's going to be a few months down the line or a while. I'm going to be probably moving to New York after I graduate. So if you do want to know a lot of the information right now, there is an account on Instagram. It's called Access Broadway New York. I'll link it in the description for you. They're really, really great, but we're going to cover this down the line. Yeah, but the one thing that I do specifically want to point out right now is that in order to have a closed captioning device at the show, you have to specifically request one from the show, and it is a 4-week wait. So not only was Hadestown aware that she had a closed captioning device, they'd known for at least a month that she would have a closed captioning device, and they also physically handed it to her. And from the way that I've seen how these caption devices work, you kind of do need to like hold it up kind of like this in order to see the captions and also see the stage. I don't like how the caption system is set up on Broadway. I think we've got things to fix there. But it does, I guess, look a bit like you are filming on a phone. But in that case, that's not the actors on stage jobs to deal with. That's the job of the ushers and the house staff. Now, I will say that Lin-Manuel Miranda knew his theater well enough in Hamilton that when he would go off stage for something, he would quickly tell somebody what row and what seat somebody was filming in, and then they would send a person to go deal with that. But even then, he told somebody else how to deal with it. Well, except for that one time, there's one tweet that he talked about how he changed the words to one of his songs, like, during the show to call an audience member that was filming. Again, I don't think that's the actor's job. That's not fair to everybody else who paid to see the performance and is getting taken out of the performance. Also, please note that I don't have a Twitter, so I had to like work to find these things. I actually went into the world of Twitter. It's a scary place to be. But anyway, I also generally have a problem with people yelling at people for having phones around in the theater. I do get that they are sometimes filming and that is not cool, and I get how they can be distractions for other audience members and that's not cool. But I also have a friend who turns their brightness all the way to the lowest setting before a show because they have to regularly check their blood sugar, which is tracked on a phone app in relationship to the, I don't know what the word for it is, but the thing that's on their arm that measures their blood sugar. I also know a doctor who can only get time off to get to go to the theater if they're directly on call, and the patient's messages come through text rather than pagers now, and so they have to leave their phone with the screen on, and they check throughout the show, and then during intermission will leave to go take those medical calls and then come back. Somebody might need to check to make sure that their babysitter or their kid who's home alone is doing okay. Phones are a thing that happen, and yeah, we should be putting down our devices and ignoring them for the whole show. It's supposed to be a time to be relaxing and be completely tech-free, and it is distracting to other people, but for some people that is not possible, and they do their best to be as discreet about it as they possibly can so as not to distract anybody else, and that is okay. And we need to stop vilifying the idea that anytime somebody's looking at their phone screen, they're doing something stupid, or actively taking photos or filming bootlegs or doing bad people things, because there are so many other reasons for having a device. And this also just like goes for phones in class and phones in work meetings and everything else. It is a massive pet peeve of mine when everybody automatically vilifies phone usage, because phones are the best accommodation that most people have for their access needs, and we don't recognize that as much as we should. So yes, the situation is not bad at all, but I haven't seen anybody bring up the conversation of, hi, what about phones being an accessibility need? And some people also might not know that there are live caption options. This technology is new, and they will choose to do live captioning on their phones to help them know what's going on during the show. Somebody should not need to directly disclose a disability to staff members in order to not be harassed for using an accommodation. And before you go, well, people are just going to take advantage of this and bootleg more. Sure. You can usually tell a difference between looking at captions or filming a video. You can speak to an usher about it when you get the chance if you're concerned about that. It's not your job as an audience member to do something about that. And I also did watch a recent video from Sam and Ryan, which I'll also link in the description for you, about how so many movie screenings and stand-up shows make you put your phone in lockers before the show to protect the privacy of the actors, and how the fact that Broadway has such a big bootlegging problem and that they're not really doing much about it, shows that they don't really, respect the work of their actors or the privacy of their actors, which I very much agree with. I do think that this poses issues for people who say need their devices on them for the things mentioned above, but I think that there is a happy medium to be had here. They also mentioned in this video how in the opening thing, when they're like, hey, maybe silence your cell phones, please, they could also mention like, some audience members are enjoying the show using a closed captioning device provided by the theater. Please be respectful of them, or something like that, so that the actors and the people in the audience are aware of what's going on, and they won't be stressed like, oh my gosh, the person is filming the whole time, and then they're just aware. And then the disabled person can actually enjoy their experience in the theater without any unnecessary anxiety that just comes with having to leave the house as a disabled person. And on that point, if you're unfamiliar with the disability experience, openly using mobility aids or medical aids or accommodations is very, very difficult, especially for people with disabilities that are considered invisible. We're gonna put that in quotations because half the time they're invisible because you're just not looking. We've talked about this before, but like I've been harassed several times over for using disabled stalls in the bathroom because I'm young and I'm sprightly and I should leave it open for the people who need it. And after like the third time of this happening, I got too anxious to use the disabled stall and I started to just use the regular ones, and then I would keep getting stuck on the toilet because sometimes my knees dislocate, my hips click. I will say that it's getting better and I'm like actually treating my stuff and I'm like actually able to function. But anyway, that's not the point. What I'm trying to say is that after just a very teeny tiny light bit of one-on-one harassment, I became too anxious to do a very basic accommodating thing that takes no extra effort, and it's caused me to have a harder time existing as a human being. So imagine how this person feels after spending over a month planning for a very specific accommodation and then being yelled at more than once by somebody famous for using that device that has been given to you by that person's employers, and having the entire audience of about 1,000 people be mad at you for being the reason that the show got weird and thinking that you're just, oh, you're such a bad person, you're so motivated to film this that you continue to do it after you're called out, despite that not being the situation at all whatsoever. And a similar situation happened in the UK in 2011 with Jess Tom. She has Tourette's. She was asked to move from her seat to the sound booth to sit during the show because her tics were distracting and people were complaining. The relaxed / sensory friendly performance movement began after this event. We're going to talk about this in an upcoming video that was going to be Wednesday, but it got moved so I could do this one. But she didn't feel safe going back into a theater for several years, I think, because of how upset and humiliated she was after that incident. And that was just being told by a theater employee, not an actor on stage. So what we should be talking about in this discussion is not just the fact that, hey, caption devices exist, and hey, phones are a common accommodation that people need to use sometimes, and hey, maybe don't call out audience members if you're an actor on stage, and racism is bad, let's not do that. But also discussion into the fact that we should not, in general, be calling out people who don't look disabled, who don't look like what we conventionally picture disability to be, for using the tools that they need to live an easier and better life. And they also should not have to disclose that disability in order to be treated that way. This is literally just basic human decency, and I don't understand why it's so difficult. So those are my thoughts on that situation. I don't think that it needed to blow up the way that it did. I'm really sorry that it has. I'm very glad that this discussion is becoming more mainstream, and that's one that we're having, because I feel like inaccessibility in the theater is not talked about as much as I would really like it to be. It's kind of stuck in certain social circles and it hasn't majorly moved into the mainstream. And I hope that this has maybe started that push, but I also think that we have a long way to go. Now, the second drama, I'll put that in quotation marks, this week that I want to talk about is the Sarah Porkalob thing. So Sarah Porkalob is an actor and theater maker who is incredible. She's in the show 1776. They use she, they pronouns, so I'm going to use those interchangeably. And she had an interview with Vulture that came out on the 14th about their experience in the show, what it's like as a person of color playing a white supremacist in the show, and what they think of the show. And this interview, Sarah was very frank and open about her opinions and experiences as a multiple minority person in the show, and how they didn't totally love how certain things were handled behind the scenes or on stage in the scenes. And when this conversation began around this interview, I was paying very close attention to how the Broadway world and community was handling it, because I have been known to write 30-page essays explaining the discrimination I experienced in a certain place, in that place where I was too afraid to stand up for myself and talk openly about it. And so instead I just did it in writing, because I felt like even though I was leaving said situation, it was important information for them to have to change the whole system, and then just dropping them outside the doors of people's offices and then leaving forever. So the fact that a person critiqued the industry openly to a news source and said a lot of things that I've also been thinking made me go, oh no, I need to learn from this, because this is probably going to accidentally be me a few years down the line, because I'm also not the best at sugarcoating what I have to say, which I guess is a bit weird and self-centered to look at it that way, but that's how my brain short-term processed it, so being honest about where I was at. So I read this article a few times. I'll link it in the description. I highly, highly recommend. We're not gonna get into the major depths of it right now. I fully agree with everything that Sarah said. Do I think that a handful of things could have been, could have had more context so that they landed better? Yes. Do I think that everybody has those same situations in an interview, because speaking in any interview is very difficult, and we are only nitpicking this specific thing now because they're a person of color critiquing the industry? Oh, you bet we are. She raised some really, really important points about how things in the rehearsal space did not feel safe and comfortable, and how they dealt with them. She talked about how she's surprised that the directors decided to revive the show at all to begin with, because it's a dusty old relic that probably shouldn't have been revived, which I firmly agree with. I don't think the show should continue to be a thing anymore. I grew up with it, it had its time, it has moved on. How they disagree with some of the staging decisions in the show, and that to her, Broadway is a job that she's working, and she's not sure if that's artistically fulfilling for them. And one of the quotes that specifically has been taken out of context a lot is the whole, I'm giving 75% when I perform this show, which I guess does pack a punch on some level, I do get that, but also, that's amazing. Sarah has boundaries and is not spending 100% of their energy all the time on their job, but rather living a life outside of it. That is wonderful and important and amazing. And their 75% is better than many people's 175%. I'm very sure of that. And for what it's worth, when I was studying in Italy this fall, one of my professors, who is a master of her craft, told us over and over every day that she wanted us to only give 70% in what we did, because otherwise we would burn out really quickly. So this is not just her idea. This is very common, and I thoroughly, thoroughly agree with what they had to say here. But since the article went kind of viral, she has been nothing but kind and understanding, albeit, their fiery, spunky self at the same time, on social media, and has been willing to learn. And I really, really, really respect them for it. They did what needed to be done. They were willing to face the consequences of that, because she knew these things needed to be said, and it was also, worth potentially losing a job over for her. And that's a conclusion that I, as an activist, have also been kind of coming to terms with, and realizing that, no job is worth missing the chance to take a stand for what's right. And I cannot express how appreciative I am of Sarah for taking their moment in this interview and making use of that. It is important to critique art. It is important to critique a broken business. It's important to talk about art as a job and not give 150% all the time, because that is not human, and you need to live a life outside of your job and set boundaries and take care of yourself. But I'm also not going to call Sarah brave for this article. And here's why. I've been in situations where I've been given the chance to voice how I felt about something as a minority person, and I knew in my soul that I could not mess it up, that I had a responsibility to my community and to younger versions of myself to say what needed to be said at whatever cost to my current self that might be, because as minority people, we live in survival mode on some level. Now, I'm not a person of color, so I don't understand that experience, but I do understand a lot of existing as a multiple minority person. And every time a person said in that situation, "Oh my gosh, you're so brave for standing up for this," I wanted to scream back in their faces that no, I'm not brave. I'm doing what is right and I'm doing what needs to be done, and I don't have a choice right now because none of you are standing up for it, and so I am the only one that we have left right now. That's not bravery. That's being the only one to take action, because I personally am the kind of person who is in genuine physical danger in the face of discrimination, and I would kind of rather fight for my life than just accept it and die. So being called brave instead of having people fight alongside me is infuriating. So what I'm instead gonna say is, thank you, Sarah, for doing the right thing. Thank you for starting this conversation. Thank you for using your platform for kindness and goodness and trying to change your corner of the world. I will not only stand beside you, but I will continue to fight for and with you. Not that you would ever watch this video, because I am wildly sure, first of all, you don't know who I am. Maybe we'll be coworkers one day, who knows? And also I'm wildly sure that you just want to like move on and continue doing the great work that they're doing, because I have a feeling that to them, this was just another interview amongst a bunch of them where they have the exact same tone and they act the same between all these different interviews. This is just the one that caught the eye of the media, because I've been in similar situations and I very, very much understand that. There's a discussion definitely to be had about this interview that's been going around about whether you're allowed to critique a show you're in or whether you should wait until the show is closed. And I think that's kind of the wrong discussion to be having, because she was given an opportunity to interview with Vulture right now. That is a big media company. And sure, they could have waited to say this stuff until after the show closed, but she doesn't know if the opportunity to interview with Vulture or any other really big company was going to come back again. She just knew what needed to be said, saw the opportunity, and then they said it. Also, for what it's worth, I know very many people who hadn't heard of or cared about the show at all before this interview and now really want to see it. So honestly, she's made the show a big deal. And also, as somebody who struggled with my intersectional minority identities in situations where I'm being discriminated against, it's very hard to get at the energy and emotional space to talk about and speak about where you're at and what is going on and stand up for that. So the fact that she did it at all is very important and very powerful, and we should be celebrating that, not focusing on the timing that it came out, because the timing of this would have been bad and it would have been bombshell no matter when the interview happened, because this industry does not like being criticized. And that brings me to the last discussion of this video, kind of for both of these events, I guess. Everybody is talking about how this is so much Broadway drama and how there's so much drama going on of late. And as an activist and as a theater goer, the drama here is not drama. Broadway has always been rife with drama for forever. It's culturally like Hollywood, but somehow kind of worse. And I say that with love, but like, it's culturally a bit of a disaster. The idea that drama is new and that the theater is a mess right now is absurd to me. What I'm seeing is people standing up for what's right, calling out the industry for refusing to move into the 21st century with the rest of us, and also the target audience of Broadway, cis white people in their 40s. They see this as threatening, and so they decide to minimize the importance of this by calling it drama that we should be ignoring. But this is minority people having experiences that they feel like others can learn from and sharing those experiences in a way that they best can, in the way that they think is going to make the most impact. And they're not doing it because they necessarily want to, but because they feel obligated to, because they feel like they need to. That is not starting drama, that's enacting social justice, and I would love it if we would just, start looking at it that way. Obviously, I care a lot about this industry. I've always dreamed of being able to change it from the inside the best that I can. The closer I get to it, the more that I realize that it's worse than I thought, and it's gonna need a lot of us to change it. But I also know that every single teeny tiny little bit counts, right? Every single teeny tiny little bit matters. And seeing all of this go down the last week has made me feel vaguely hopeful that maybe some things are changing and maybe some things are moving and things will be okay. But it's also made me scared that there's still so much backlash for people sharing, common sense things. But the backlash is also often the worst right before big changes happen. And within the disability and trans and queer communities, after this, I'm not majorly in the BIPOC community, obviously, but I would assume that it's probably very similar. I have seen nothing but love after both of these events, and that is filling me with joy and hope as well, and I'm seeing new people join our cause as well. And I think the industry is going to change. The industry is changing, whether people like it or not. And I feel like I'm starting to watch a bit of that revolution happen and starting to also work on that with my own stuff, which is really freaking cool. But I'm gonna stop being sappy. I just wanted to share where I'm at in thinking about all of this as somebody kind of in the middle of the fight for accessible theater at the moment, and specifically about the fact that accessibility is intersectional. I'm sending my love to Samantha Coleman, to Lilies White, to Sarah Porkalab. Keep on doing what you're doing. And as always, thank you for listening. Thank you for learning. Remember, it's never too late to start over. I look forward to seeing you, my dear, in the next one.